Hey there, everyone. Thanks for joining this episode of the Biological Podcast. I'm your host, Jack, and this week we'll be discussing the effects of breathing on anxiety and depression. We have a very special guest for you today. His name is Michael Burnett. Mike, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So I guess we can just hop right into it here. One point I'd like to cover is in modern day society, at least in first world countries, we tend to treat our ailments such as like anxiety, depression, or other mental illnesses by taking pills or using medicinal route. But there are a lot of other like alternative methods that people can use to treat these issues that they're just not aware of that could be equally or even more beneficial. One of them I've come across recently was bringing breathing into consciousness and using that to combat these negative components. So I guess first off, what are some of the popular breathing techniques that you've come across, and what are some of them that you like to put into practice yourself?
Well, there has been one that has been gaining a lot of traction as of recent times. It's called the Wim Hof method. I personally use it quite a bit. I think say daily.
So how do you describe the Wim Hof method? What is it exactly?
To keep it simple, it's basically a method of breathing where you're breathing in long, deep breaths and you're releasing only a smaller portion of it out. And you
So
do
what does
this.
that? Sorry for interrupting. What does that do for you?
Basically, you are providing more oxygen to your cells, and it's packing more oxygen in. And in fact, the oxygen capacity in your body, if you do this method, it increases quite a bit in a short amount of time. I think when they studied Wim Hof himself, after 45 minutes of doing his method, I think it was something like the amount of oxygen in his body doubled, and the amount of
less than
CO2.
an hour?
Yes,
That's
less than an
insane,
hour.
man. That's
So your cells will convert that oxygen into CO2 and water, and provide more energy to your body and for all your functions too.
such an interesting concept because we usually generally perceive breathing as an autonomous function that we
Right.
don't think about it.
Yeah.
It just happens. It just like breathe, we eat, we sleep, whatever. But like you can actually bring it into consciousness and like utilize it as a tool to work on yourself, whether it be physically or mentally. And that's pretty interesting. It kind of brings me to this article I found recently. It's pretty interesting. The study was actually conducted by people go by the name of Ravinder Jarrett, Molly Crawford, Vernon Barnes, and Kyle Hardin. They hypothesized that utilizing meditation is a alternative use rather than taking pills or medicine to treat anxiety and depression, which is pretty interesting. The fact that you could just breathe and you wouldn't have to go pay for medication, you wouldn't have to go to the doctor, you wouldn't have all these negative side effects that come with it, like addiction. Then there's like it builds up in your immune system, so the treatment might become ineffective over time. And it's just an interesting thought that this simple thing that you are already doing at every given second could be used as a tool to combat these things.
Yeah, like a doorway into.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly like the way you put that. So I mean, there's obviously something going on when you meditate physically and mentally. What are some of the physical or mental shifts that you notice personally when you are doing these breathing exercises?
I'd say a big one is just the general shift of your awareness from being reactive to your environment to shifting your focus inward and kind of just figuring out what's happening when you are under stressful states or just from moment to moment. So I'd say you shift from a more responsive state of being, shift from a more reactive state of being to a responsive, and you gain more control of how you respond to your situations and your environment.
So like situations in your environment, like all these external stimulus, like street lights or cars going by.
Yeah, in our society or in modern society with all the technological innovation, everything's just kind of thrown in your face, and we're just overstimulated, and I feel like that plays a big role in anxiety today, and people just they're overstimulated, they don't know how to cope with their reaction to it, because they're being very reactive unconsciously to the environment rather than realizing what's going on and be able to work through it.
So like by bringing breathing into consciousness, you can kind of use that to bring other subconscious things into consciousness also.
Yeah, yeah. You're just gaining more awareness of what's going on, like in your body.
Yeah, that actually relates to something I was reading in this article earlier. So they kind of described what was actually going on in your body when you're doing these breathing exercises, and pretty much there was a shift between your mind, from your mind and your body, towards a parasympathetic state, which essentially is when your muscles are relaxed and your heartbeat slows down. You're just a calm state of existing. Um, they're also talking about how your body will exhibit these increased levels of cardiorespiratory synchronicity. So essentially, that's just when your heartbeat and your breath will kind of synchronize into like a nice rhythm, like an even pace, instead of like if you're breathing really fast, your heart would be fast and be all out of sync, essentially. So, yeah, and then it's also said as like exhibited sympathonhibition, which is the inhibition of the sympathetic nervous system. So I guess the sympathetic nervous system is responsible for like an increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, or like the constriction of your arteries or valves or blood vessels. So pretty much all these things that lead to negative physical health, like increased heart rate or constricted blood vessels, could lead to heart issues in the future.
Yeah, yeah.
And the fact that we have all these negative stressors, but if you just focus on your breath and slow it down. So why don't you think we have moved towards that as like a majority of the masses and are so intertwined with taking pills and medication? Why do you think we don't practice this clearly beneficial technique?
I'd say one is that it's just easier to take a pill. It's easier just to pop it in and just wait for the results. But as we can see, they're costly. And not only that, but they tend to have a lot of side effects. And a lot of people, if not die, get seriously ill from them or gain dependencies on these medications.
Yeah, I think the death rate for like overdoses on medication is like insanely high compared to like other causes of death.
Oh, for sure, definitely.
So you think if like just education is a factor, if people like knew.
Yeah,
like,
that's another big thing is people don't generally know about these things, or they may have heard it like here and there, but a lot of it has a lot of woo-woo stuff behind it. But now a lot of science is showing like what's happening, like the chemical reactions in your body and how our breathing influences that.
Yeah, it's funny to say that because in the article we're discussing, there's a talk about your amygdala, which is the part of your brain that's closely correlated to experiencing emotion. So whenever it's funny because it works both ways. If you start breathing rapidly, it could lead to anxiety or negative aspects like that. Or if you're anxious, it could lead to short breath and increased heart rate. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the amygdala, when you're in an anxious state, the amygdala is also an excited state, so it's causing all these.
Responsible for tightening muscles and.
Yeah, tightening muscles, just like.
Sure.
Yeah, everything along those lines, and I just think it's interesting that we don't yet, as a society, utilize these simple, easily accessible, free techniques that anyone in the world has access to. So are you hopeful for our future as us moving towards that in a direction as a whole? Because I know, like you said, there are, like, as far as my research has gone, there's been a lot more studies in the past decade than previously, exponentially. But yeah, sorry. Do you have hope that we'll move towards this as a whole, as a society?
Yeah, I think that people are starting to realize the downsides to a lot of these medications, and they are looking for something more practical and simple and easily accessible, like breathing. It's certainly safer, and I am hopeful. I think the more and more words getting spread out, and more people are hearing about it.
Yeah, I do think it's becoming more popular too. Like yoga is like one form of like a breathing technique. Like guess it's also mixed with exercise that more people are catching on to and doing stuff like that. So yeah, I'm curious to see where we go towards that as a society, and hopefully we can start implementing it and all these millions of people that are suffering from anxiety disorder, depression, can have an accessible and cheap way to combat those issues.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's all we have time for today. I appreciate you coming out here to talk.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Biological Podcast. And once again, I'm your host Jack, and this is our guest Michael.